More challenges are facing Africa as its leaders gather for yet another summit, this time in Uganda. But is the African Union capable of addressing the threats to the continent? Is the Union any relevance at all? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Sahil Rahman. The African Union Summit is underway in the Ugandan capital Kampala, and two main issues are expected to dominate. The first, and the one expected to overshadow the gathering, is Somalia and the battle against al-Shabab. Uganda wants a stronger mandate for AU troops already there. If not, it says it'll go it alone following the 11th of July attacks in Kampala. The assault was the first on foreign soil by the Somali group al-Shabab. The second will focus on a man who is not attending Sudan's President Omar Al Bashir, wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes and genocide. The AU will make it clear that member states should not arrest him. Well, joining me now are my guests in Nairobi, Muganda. He's an advisor to the Kenyan Prime Minister Raila Odinga, and in Dubai, Hamdi Abdurrahman Hassan. He's a professor of political science at Cairo University. Gentlemen, welcome to Inside Story. And Mr. Hassan, can I begin with you? The theme may be maternal and child care, but attacks on World Cup night in Kampala certainly focused events for the Horn of Africa and much of the continent. How much of this summit do you think is going to be taken over by the issue of al-Shabab?
You know, always there is an official theme for the African Union summits. This time there is the health care, it's maternal and infant and child health and development. But it will be the Somali, as you said in the introduction, will center the stage in the African Union meeting in Kampala. You know that in the last match of the FIFA, in the 18th of this month, it was a terrible attack, hit Kampala for the first time. And it was at the same time the first foreign act by al-Shabab. And the consequences of this attack in Kampala, I think, will be a disaster, not only for Uganda, but for the whole Central and Eastern Africa region. So I think what I could call the Somali disease needs to be tackled, because the African Union has failed to deal with it. It's the issue of the peacekeeper. I think it didn't work, because in the Somalia case, we need to reconsider the concept and the tools of peacekeeping forces, because it's very simple. If you don't have peace.
If you don't mind me just interrupting there, we'll talk about those issues of peacekeeping just for the moment. I just want to get your initial thoughts on that. Mr. Muganda in Nairobi, you've heard what Mr. Hassan has had to say there in Dubai. What concerns the Kenyan government? Because only in recent days there have been skirmishes on the Somalia-Kenya border. Does that take precedence over what's actually being discussed in Kampala at the AU summit?
Thank you very much. The issue of security is very, very important because the security of the region, and in our case, the security of our country and the territorial integrity of Kenya is so key to our stability, to our development. But I think the issue should be, what are the causes of al-Shabab, for example. Al-Shabab did not just come out of nowhere, and obviously their involvement in Somalia is not over nothing. So if the meeting in Kampala can pay close attention to the root cause of al-Shabab, then the problem could probably be addressed, because today it is Somalia, tomorrow it will be somewhere else. And it is better to address the problem comprehensively rather than waiting for that kind of attack to happen, and then you are reacting against it.
How do you think...
that's my initial thought.
Those are your initial thoughts. In terms of the policy of the Kenyan government, how do you think, for example, Kenya should react in the light of countries like Uganda and Burundi suggesting the possibility of more troops being sent in to Somalia under the AMISCOM flag as such, AMISOM flag, but also instead of a peacekeeping role, a more aggressive role, therefore changing the mandate of why those troops are there?
You see, my feeling is that just troops will not solve the problem. If it was just a question of troops, more troops and more firepower, then even Iraq would not be a problem right now, nor would Afghanistan. This conflict is not about who has the biggest gun. This conflict at the end of it is about the coherence of the nation state. How coherent is the Somalian state, as it were? Is the state built on fundamental, on firm ground? Because if it is not, then it doesn't matter really whether you go in and you could take out al-Shabab and then another outfit will come up. Before al-Shabab, there was another group, I think. It was called the Islamic Courts. Well, so the Islamic Courts are no longer there, but then you have al-Shabab.
Mr. Hassan, let me bring you in here in Dubai as well.
Where I'm coming from.
Yeah, no, totally. Let's bring in Mr. Hassan here, who's in Dubai. Somalia has been on shaky ground for, nearly 3 decades now. Is it not the case that, or is it too much of an assumption to assume that you have to take out al-Shabab before you can actually stabilise the country and before you can get the people of Somalia to really decide what type of government they want? At the moment, they have a very shaky, perhaps a weak government, as seen in the eyes of many Somalis who really do not have control of the full country.
The Somali question is getting more complicating because the West and the American is still just focusing on the issue of terrorism. And even after Kampala attacks, what came from the leaders in Uganda is that they are going to weed the terrorists out of the country. And the language will getting more harsh against how to eradicate radicalism and militarism or Islamism in Somalia. This is not, as my colleague from Nairobi said, this is not the way how to deal with the root causes with the conflict in Somalia. It is more complicated. You have a very weak government just taking control of some streets in Mogadishu, and al-Shabab and their al-Hizb al-Islami, or the Islamic party, they are dominating most of Somalia, in southern Somalia, central Somalia, and most of Mogadishu. And you're still talking about al-Shabab as a terrorist organization. Somalia needs to be taken care with. And look at the neighboring, the Somaliland. Somaliland, through its own local initiative, managed to have peace, and now they have election, and they are a stable society. So if we follow the Somaliland example, in order to have a grassrooted solution, it will be a first step towards a lasting peace and security in Somalia. But with this foreign agenda, or trying to put more troops to support a very weak government in Somalia, I think this is not a case. The Somali society becoming more and more radicalized under the call of the al-Shabab, and the al-Shabab offering themselves as a national independence liberation movement, or as a movement of...
I do want to bring in, actually, because we have our guest in Uganda, Patrick Muganda Guma. He's spokesperson for the Uganda Ministry of Foreign Affairs and for the AU Summit National Task Force. Thanks for joining us, sir, from Kampala. You've been hearing from Mr. Hassan, our professor from Cairo University, sitting in Dubai. Just initially, we're talking about now even your government's proposal to send in more troops. How much has the mindset changed for Uganda since those attacks on the 11th of July to what you're actually suggesting right now? And do you think that sending more troops in on a different mandate, i.e. a mandate to tackle al-Shabab, is really going to solve the problem for Somalia?
Well, thank you very much. The mindset has not changed because of the attacks. Our determination has always been there, and our will to help our fellow Africans in Somalia has always been there. So it's not the incidents of 11th of July that have changed or have strengthened our resolve. Our resolve is there. And now what we're talking about is the change of the mandate, because the mandate that has been there is limiting us to just protecting the three positions in Somalia. Now that we've been attacked, as the President of the Republic of Uganda, President Yoweri Museveni, said, this now gives us the impetus to actually go and look for the enemy, because the enemy has declared war on our country. We're not neighboring Somalia, but these enemies have moved all the way from the other end to come and inflict harm on our innocent people, young people enjoying themselves. This gives us the resolve and the impetus to move and really look for the enemy wherever he is.
And of course, in the process of this particular programme, we'll be speaking about the other issues at the African Union Summit that you hope to discuss. But do you think that the issue of Somalia may overshadow all the other discussions you want to have over healthcare and the other issues that are affecting African states, such as corruption and development and investment?
No, it's not, definitely it's not going to overshadow. But of course, you know, we have a theme, the theme that was thought about and discussed and properly worked on by the African Union Commission in consultation with the member countries. This is a theme that is strong. It is in consonance with the Millennium Development Goals. We are trying as much as possible to ensure that we attain those development goals that were set up by summit in New York. And the way these meetings are conducted here at the summit is that they have a chairman who is capable enough to steer the discussions to the main theme. And much as the issue of Somalia is going to be high on the agenda, it definitely is not going to veer us off the main theme, which is maternal, infant and child health, development and development in Africa.
Well, let's bring our viewers up to speed with the other issues that are hoped to be discussed in Kampala. The State of the Union Coalition formed a monitor to monitor African development, and they've released a report now launched exactly 1 year since African leaders promised to ratify all outstanding AU treaties, conventions and charters within 12 months. The report says African leaders are failing to deliver on promises made to tackle issues of human rights, corruption and healthcare. Taking 10 key African Union nations, a scorecard put South Africa as the best performing country, while Nigeria and Cameroon came last. What was clear, however, was that all African governments have to do more and invest in Africa's future. The South African President Jacob Zuma was optimistic.
Africa is currently a region in the world that has started on the economic growth, and it has potential that no other continent has. Other continents that have been big for centuries are shrinking in the economic sense. Africa is going to be #1, and therefore, putting infrastructure now, we are in fact getting ready for our future.
Mr. Muganda in Nairobi, it's often said, and the facts are highlighted, that 40% of women, for example, have never had a basic education. But despite evidence that says that with education, there would be a reduced risk of maternal mortality or HIV infection. From your position in Kenya, what have you done as a government that would be an example to the rest of Africa to try and enhance the position and the health care of women and children with regards to what's being discussed at the AU conference?
Well, you know, you are putting me in an awkward position because I'm not speaking on behalf of the Kenyan government on this issue. We have the Ministry of Health, but I can say this based on the knowledge I have as a member of this government, is that, for example, Many clinics have been opened up in the last 5 years throughout Kenya, which provide all kinds of services, health services, including information pertaining to the prevention of HIV/AIDS. I'm not sure about the 40% or whether or not that is actually reflective of the situation in Kenya, but the situation is not as dire as the statistics that you've read show, at least on Kenya. But it is not good. I would think that with more vigor in the coming 3 years before the next election, the government will put in place mechanisms of improving the situation. It's not as good as I would want it to be, but I cannot speak specifically of statistics from the Ministry of Health because I don't work with the Ministry of Health.
And I certainly wasn't trying to put you on the spot there, though we know that Kenya's position is, Kenya is in a much better position than some other African nations. Mr. Hassan, in Dubai, I mean, what is the possibility of success at a conference like this to actually put into place projects and schemes that would, certainly by the host nation, Uganda, be seen to be being advantageous and helping women and children to receive the goals that certainly Uganda would like to see the other African nations achieve?
You know, the issue of health care and how to make health services in Africa more accessible and affordable by ordinary African people is a big issue, and it needs to be you know, attended by every African nation. I could add to my Kenyan colleagues, there is a success story of Kenya about her strategy in reducing the mortality rate among infants. If you look at the statistics in Kenya, they managed to reduce the mortality rate from 77 per 1,000 in 2003 to just 52 per 1,000 in 2009. So how to share this strategy among all African countries and to focus on women, because women who are giving life are suffering and are dying while they are giving life. So this is actually is an issue, and it reflects the issue of development. In Africa, we are dealing with the Millennium Development Goals. We're still lagging behind, and there is a feeling among African masses that their leaders are failing them, because after now more than 50 years of independence, we are repeating the same stories of African Union or United Nation of Africa, or these slogans, but the concrete socio-economic development which affect the ordinary life of people is still lacking in Africa.
Sure.
And instead, we are talking about corruption, about establishing new political dynasties in Africa. This is a very unique trend in Africa now.
Indeed.
About inheritance of political leadership. This is a very known trend in Africa nowadays.
And it's certainly one that's addressed by countries outside of the African continent. If I can come back to Mr. Guma in Kampala. You have the former British Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, actually at the AU summit. And when he was Prime Minister in the United Kingdom, he promised to put Africa top of the agenda. He's actually stating at the moment that he believes that the internet and IT technology is perhaps the source of success for the African continent. He's not in power anymore, so how can he actually help Uganda or other African nations in the position he's in?
No, he's not being in power does not stop him from conveying the message to the government, the other end, and talking to pressure groups, the other end, to ensure that the message is delivered and implemented.
Let me go over to Mr. Hamdi Rahman Hassan in Dubai. It is a very difficult dilemma, is it not, for African nations at the moment with regards to the ICC arrest warrants?
Could just let me remind you about the opening session that the Malawian president, who is the president of the current summit, he reassured the African Union position regarding the ICC and the indictment of President Al Bashir. He said that President Al Bashir is a sovereign head of a state and he shouldn't be arrested. And the best way to solve this Sudanese conflict is not by arresting a sovereign head of a state, but throwing how to make solidarity in order to have a breakthrough in Sudan. So the position of the African Union, talking about the African Union, is against the indictment of Al Bashir and refusing that to make Africa as a test case for the ICC, because all indicted or all cases in front of the ICC, it's from Africa. The 5 cases, outstanding cases, are African cases. So there is a feeling among Africans about the double standard of the ICC, about the politicization of the ICC. So the test was when Al Bashir attended the Sahel al-Sahara, the Sin-Sad meeting in Chad, because Chad is a signatory, and she refused to listen to the ICC and to arrest Al Bashir. And that the president of Chad said exactly that he is obliged by the African Union position not to arrest Al Bashir. I think this is the formal stand of the African Union.
Indeed. Mr. Muguna, I mean, as an advisor to the Kenyan Prime Minister, and Kenya is also signatory to the ICC, do you think that they will also back the resolution if it is proposed in Kampala?
You see, it's one thing to speak about the Kenyan position as a state party to the Rome Statute. It's another to speak about what my view is. I'll speak about what my view is first. I believe in the rule of law. I believe in good governance. I believe very strongly that respect for human rights and the end of impunity, particularly dealing with gross human rights violations, is an important issue for African countries not to dodge. Africans have suffered over the decades from bad governance. Mm-hmm. And the Sudanese situation is very much a test case of whether or not Africa is ready to embrace international human rights and the rule of law, or they are going to continue abrogating it under some mambo jumbo called state sovereignty. I don't believe that a criminal should be protected by some state sovereignty issue. I think Africa is really copping out here. Solidarity of states have not helped Africans from dying in the Congo, did not help the Sudanese situation, has not helped Somalia, has not helped all the hotspots in Africa.
And there for the moment, I do apologise, Mr. Muguna, there for the moment we have to leave it because we're running out of time. I'd like to thank my guests in Kampala, Patrick Muganda Guma, in Nairobi, Muguna, and in Dubai, Hamdi Abdulrahman Hassan. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me on this edition of the programme, and thank you for watching this edition of Inside Story. We do welcome your comments and suggestions. Please do email us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. I'm Sahil Rahman. Thanks for your time and your company.